Hello everyone, welcome to Puzzle League and another tutorial episode of the Variety Sudoku Intermediate Series. My name is Eric, and today we'll be looking at the consecutive Sudoku puzzle. First, we'll go over the rules to make sure we understand the puzzle. Then, I'll explain the workbook solving guide, after which I'll solve the complete problem from the beginning. Let's begin. So the rules are just like those of classic Sudoku with one additional rule. Cells separated by a bold line must contain consecutive numbers, and unseparated cells must not contain consecutive numbers. If we look here at this example, you can see that this cell here that contains the number 3 is separated by the cell below it that contains the number 4 with a black line. Now, this is correct since the black lines separate consecutive numbers. But if you take a look at the cell to the right of the number 3, you can see that it has the number 1 and no black line. Well, this is correct because 1 and 3 are non-consecutive numbers. Now let's go through this example together. If you're following along, go to page 52 of your Variety Sudoku Intermediate Workbook. I'll be explaining each of the 4 progressions. The bold lines must separate consecutive numbers, as we said. In this cell of the second block, we must place a number that is consecutive to 4. The only potential numbers that fit this rule are 3 and 5. However, due to the number 3 already in the first row, we must place the number 5 here. Now for the sixth block, the only number that is consecutive to 1 is 2. Similarly, since the 1 already exists in this block, the only other number consecutive to 2 is 3. So we can place the red numbers as shown here. Once again, the number 4 is the only other number consecutive to 3 that we haven't yet placed. But since none of the adjacent cells around the 3 has a black line, the number 4 must be placed in this cell here. In this next progression, in the first yellow cell, we can place either a 2 or a 6, both of which are non-consecutive to 4. However, the number 2 already exists in the last column, so we must place the number 6 here. The second yellow cell can either contain 1, 2, or 3, all of which are non-consecutive to 6. But due to the numbers 1 and 2 in the last column, this cell must contain 3. And finally, the last yellow cell can only contain a 5, as all the other numbers in the last column have been placed. In this third progression, we must place the number 6 in this yellow cell, because it is the only number that is non-consecutive to both 3 and 4. You see here that there are no black lines. The 4 and 2 are placed as above, with the 4 being consecutive to the 3, and 2 being non-consecutive to both 4 and 5. If we place the 2 above the 4, like this, well, this wouldn't work, and the rule would be broken because the 4 and the 5 would be next to each other, and there's no black line here. So in this way, we can just keep going to fill in the rest of the puzzle. Now, hopefully you're starting to get the hang of the rules. Now I'll be solving workbook example 43 from the beginning. This is on page 53 of your workbook. If you haven't done so already, I encourage you to pause the video and try it yourself first, and then come back if you get stuck, or if you want to know how I solve these problems. So taking a quick look at the puzzle, I see that the fifth block here has the most black lines out of any other block. I want to start here because it gives us the most information about which numbers can go where. So let's get started. Let's start by filling in this cell here. Well, we see that there's a black line between this cell and the cell with the number 6. The only number that is consecutive to 6 is 5, so we have no choice but to put the 5 here. In this cell, it has to be a number that is non-consecutive to 5. Those are the numbers 3, 2, or 1. However, if you take a look at the other cells in this block, we see that we cannot place a 1 in either this cell, or this cell, due to the ones in the last row and the third column. So the 1 has no choice but to go here. If we move to the right, we see that there's another black line, and the only number that is consecutive to 1 is 2. So we can fill that in. Similarly, the only number left that is consecutive to 2 is 3. And the last number in this block is 4. Now, just to make sure we got it right, we see that numbers 1 and 6 that are adjacent to the number 4 are both non-consecutive to number 4. Now let's look at this cell here. We know that this cell must contain the number consecutive to 3. That's either 2 or 4. But due to the number 4 in the last row, we must place the 2 here. Now if you look at this last row, the only remaining number is 5, so we can fill that in. Now if we take a look at this last block, we know that it's missing the numbers 3, 4, and 6. Now due to this black line here, we know that the numbers in this cell and this cell must be consecutive. And among these 3 numbers, the only numbers that are consecutive are 3 and 4. So we know these 2 cells must contain 3 and 4. But which one goes where? Well, that's easy. We see that in the 4th column, the number 4 already exists. So the 4 must be placed here, and the 3 goes here. Now, the last remaining number is 6, we can just place here. Great, we've completed 2 out of 6 blocks. Let's move on to this block here. The number that must go in this cell is a number that is non-consecutive to 5. That gives us the options of 1, 2, or 3. Well, we can't place the number 1 due to the number 1 already in that block, so we're left with the possibilities 2 or 3 in this cell here. However, if we look over here, we see that there's a number 1, and that the cell above it must be consecutive to 1. Well, the only number that's consecutive to 1 is 2, so we can place that here. And then the only number that is consecutive to 2 that is already not in this block is 3. So we place that there. The only remaining consecutive number to 3 is 4. And now we're left to place the numbers 5 and 6 in this block. Well, due to the number 5 in the 2nd column and 3rd row, the 5 must be placed here. And then the 6 goes here. Let's move on to the 4th block. In this cell, we need a number that is non-consecutive to both 4 and 5. That leaves us with the numbers 1 or 2. Well, due to the number 2 in the 4th column, we must place the number 1 here. Now if we take a look at this cell, it must be a number that is non-consecutive to both 1 and 3. And that leaves us with the possible numbers 5 and 6. Well, we already have the number 5 in this block. So the only number that can fit in this cell is the number 6. In this cell, we need a number that is non-consecutive to 6, and that hasn't been used before. Well, we have the options of 4, 3, or 2. If we look to the left, we see that numbers 2 and 3 already exist in this row. So the only number that can go here is 4. Above the 4, we need a consecutive number. The 5 already exists in this block, so we must place the 3. And the last remaining number in this block is 2. Let's keep working our way up. Taking a look at this first column, we see that it's missing the numbers 1 and 2. However, we don't know which one should go where yet. In the cell next to it, we must place a number that is non-consecutive to both 6 and 5. And that leaves us with the options 1, 2, and 3. Due to the number 3 in the first column, the number 3 in this first block must be placed in this cell. Now the number that is consecutive to 3 is 2, so we place that here. And the number that is consecutive with 2 is 1, so we place that here. In this cell, the only number left that is consecutive with 3 is 4. And the number that is non-consecutive to 4, while being consecutive to 5, is 6, which is also the last number of the block. So that's easy, we've completed that first block. In this cell of the second block, the only number we know that's consecutive to 5 is 6. In the next cell, the only numbers that are consecutive to 2 are 1 and 3. But we see that the only missing number from this entire column is 1. In this top cell, we need a number that is consecutive to 4. We have the options of either 3 or 5. But we see that the 5 already exists in this fourth column, so we must place the number 3. A simpler explanation would be that 3 is the only number left that is unused in this column. And lastly, in this last column, we're missing the numbers 2 and 5. Well, due to the number 5 in the first row, 5 must be placed here and the 2 goes here. Now it looks like we've completed the puzzle. To see if we've placed all the numbers correctly, we can do a quick check of the rules. Each row, each column, and each block contains each number from 1 to 6. Those are the rules of classic Sudoku. However, we must also satisfy the one extra rule of consecutive Sudoku. And if we go through each cell and carefully examine the numbers, we will see that cells that are divided by a black line will contain consecutive numbers, and those that aren't will contain non-consecutive numbers. The solution to this problem is in the back of your book as well, but only check once you've finished it for yourself. And that is the tutorial to consecutive Sudoku. I hope it helped, and hopefully now you can finish the rest of the puzzles on your own.